Okay, assuming that your virtual machine ready and also the data disk already got it up and running. So right now I have one virtual machine is working, and I have spin up two resources. One is the OS that come with the VM. So you can see this is the OS disk. And there's another extended list that I already created for this tutorial. So you see this is a 30 gigabyte for the OS and 40 gigabyte for the extended disk. Access it into the virtual machine. So this what we are going to see is 30 gigabyte, which is the OS, but we don't see the extended list. So the only way to see the extended list is by issuing lsblk. Now it clearly shows that SDC, the partition SDC, is actually 40 gigabyte. So it's actually matching what we already have, which is the 40 gigabyte and 30 gigabyte for the OS disk. So now, how are we gonna do this? So basically, there's a 3 command that we will need to use. Okay, before we move on, we need to take a look the third important command. So for the first one, park mean a disk partition utility, and then there's a -dev and -sdc. This is like what kind of disk that you are targeting, and then -dash script meaning disable all interactive POM, and then you have the mk label GPT, which is create a new GPT on a disk, erasing any existing partition table. And then you have the mk part, and then from the 0 to 100%. So that means you're gonna create a partition named fs part using the fs file system that occupy entire disk from 0% to 100%. And then now moving to the second command, the fkfs.sfs. So it's just like a sfs, just create a sfs file system, that's all. And then you have the path of the disk. So this is what your target partition. Okay. So for the third one, which means that a program that informs the operation system kernel of the partition table, and then if something changes, this is gonna notify the operating system. And then once again, we have this specific target partition. And then we will run the second command. Okay. And then the third command. Okay. So now we need to create a new folder. So the new folder will actually have attach our extended disk into this folder. So let's see that I'm going to making a folder called data drive, and then I'm going to mount this extended disk into this data drive. Okay. So a lot of people actually stop here, but that's an issue. Whenever you restart your virtual machine, you're going to lose this data drive. The reason is you never actually permanently to register into the VM machine. So in order to do that, we need to register this extended list. So whenever you actually restart your virtual machine, you will actually have this data disk attached to it. So this is how we're going to do it. Okay, so this is another complicated command that I would like to talk about it. So basically we have this long string of UUID. So what is that? This is actually the universal unit identifier for the partition. So using the UUID make it more reliable to identify any partition regardless of the disk if they're on. So and then we have this data drive, which is the folder that we create previously, and then what type of the file. So in this case it's XFS, and then we have this default no file. So this is the mount option. default referring to the mount option and no fail, allow the system to put even the mount fail for some reason. And for the one, is instruct the dump utility back up the partition. This is actually really historical, not often used nowadays. And 2 means the passing field. It is used to determine the order in which the file system checks are done at boot time. The root file system should have the highest priority, usually 1, and other file systems should have 2 or 0. If it is 0, the file system won't be checked. So adding this line to the XCFS tab ensure that the particular partition identified by its UUID is automatically mounted to the specific directory, which is the dash data drive. Using the SFS file system and then define the option when the system start up. It is actually simplify the mounting process, make it automatically and persistent cost reboot. First of all, you're gonna see what is the UUID. Okay, so once we actually format the partition SDC, it will become the SDC1. So the one that you're looking for is this SDC1 UUID. Okay, so I'm gonna save this UUID into a variable. Okay, so now I have a variable called UUID. So basically, if I echo the UUID, so when we echo the UUID, we will have the UUID saved into this variable. This is why we are trying to save that. Now we are gonna create another variable we're gonna use later on, which is this new line UUID. So now we have all the variable. We will just need to append the new line to this file. Okay, so we already append all the information into this FS tab. As you can see on the last line, we already registered our UUID for the extended list and also the data drive. So whenever we restart the virtual machine, attach to every single time. You don't need to worry about why my extended list is not actually attached to the VM, but by doing this, you will have that every time you reboot the system. I'm gonna do a test on that, see if that's the case. Okay, I'm gonna exit, and then I'm going to restart my virtual machine. Actually, I'm going to reboot it. So it's gonna take a while to restart the virtual machine. When it's ready, we will come back. Okay, so the virtual machine successfully restarted. I'm going to access back into the virtual machine and see what's going on. Okay, so if I check this, we will still have that 40 GB attached to the data drive, which is awesome. We are gonna move to another subject. So how we gonna resize the extended list? So the first thing, if you are running your VM machine on a production environment, so I would suggest you to stop the virtual machine first, because there's gonna be a lot of I/O interaction with the disk, so you don't want to get a corrupted file. So if you're running on a production environment, just stop the virtual machine first. Once the virtual machine is stopped, we will resize the disk. Okay, now we can actually go into the data list, and we will go into the size and performances. And as you can see right now, we have 40 GB as original, but let's say that we will have to increase 64 GB. We will be changing the input of the 64 GB, and then we're gonna save it. So while we're actually waiting, there's something that we need to do inside the virtual machine, because when you try to resize it in here, it doesn't work. Now I'm going to go back to the virtual machine. I'm going to restart it. Okay. I'm going to start it, actually, not restart it. So I'm gonna start the virtual machine. Previously, we stopped it because we don't want to have the data communication between the file system. So that way we will not have a corrupted file, as I said previously. Now the virtual machine is up and running. Okay. So now let's go back to the virtual machine. I'm going to access into it. Okay, so when we check the disk, and you will see there's 40 gigabyte originally, but what happened to the 64 gig? Okay, so that is the trick. Now we need to do a little bit stuff in order to have the data list resize. Okay, so before we need to resize the data disk, we need to install some tool, actually a package. Okay, so I'm gonna download the gdisk in the cloud gas utility. Okay, so now it's done. So before we resize anything, let's take a look. Now we have actually we don't. Actually we have a SDA partition that's 64 gig, and we also have the SDA1 partition is 40 gig. So basically what we want to do is we are going to increase the size of 46 gig. So what we need to do, we need to do the grow part. Okay, so say for example we need to grow the part of the SDA, and then 1, which is this one. Don't forget the sudo. Okay, so now it's changed, but we still need to go into another folder. We need to go our folder for data drive. Okay, okay, so if you actually looking into the folder, you will see 64 gigabyte already into the data drive. So BLL, let's see, LPSK. So when you here, you will see everything is 64 gig, and then the SDA partition also 64 gig, which is awesome. All right, so that's all to it. Thank you guys, and I hope that you enjoy this video. Thank you so much.